Yep.
All right, my opponent's ready?
No.
No?
Yes.
Okay. My partner ready?
Yep.
Okay. First, judge a quick roadmap. I'm going to attack their harms, their plan, their advantage 1, and their advantage 2. First, let's look at observation 1, harms. So point A. They say that Cuba needs building materials to fix their houses. We say that they don't have the money to buy these materials. I have 2 cards to back up my claim. For my first card, it says that Cubans are poor by Oprah here of 2008. What is known is that Cuba's average wage is nearly $20 a month and recognized by the official media, which would translate to an average income of $240 a year. And my second card says that Cuban people can hardly afford food, from King of 2010. A shortage of food in Cuba has resulted in a strict system of rationing. The rations per person per month: 5 pounds of rice, 4 pounds of sugar, 1 to 2 bags of salt, whatever the size of they are, 1 tube of toothpaste for up to 4 persons in the house, and 8 ounces of grain and other types of grains in the rice, and a quarter pound of cooking oil per person per month, and a half a bar of soap per person per month, and 2 bags of coffee per person per month, and 4 eggs per person per month. As you can see, Judge, in these 2 cards show you that Cuban people can barely have enough money for basic necessities. How are they going to be able to afford the expensive imported building materials from the United States? Next, let's move on to their harms, subpoint B. They say that Cuba lacks the materials to fix their homes. But we say that thousands of businesses in Cuba sell building materials. My evidence is from over 1,000 independent Cuban businesses sell building materials in Cuba by Associated Press of 2011. The Communist Party newspaper Granma published an article on Monday praising more than 1,000 independent shops that sell building materials in Cuba, said that the stores give Cubans more access to supplies without having the negative of the bourgeoisie. According to these products no longer mean immerse oneself in the tangles of innumerable legal documents that in many cases factually corruption and favoritism towards a chosen few who were not, were not always the most needed. In the paper says the government has long controlled all construction on the island. Cement and other building materials were available in theory in state-run stores and heavily subsidized prices by determined greatly outstretched supplies that are partly due to profit from the state stocks. The impact of this, Judge, is that there is no need for Cubans to buy building materials from the United States because it is noticeably cheaper and more convenient for them to buy from their own country's small businesses than from our country's monopolies. And anyway, looking back at my partners 1 and C, Cubans aren't even buying from their companies in their country, so there's no way that they would buy from the United States. Next, let's move on to their plan. They say that the Cuban government is going to buy building materials from the United States and then in turn are going to sell the materials to the Cuban people. But we say that the Cuban government is so in debt that there is no way that they could buy these materials from us. Also, I pointed out that in my harms attack, the Cuban people don't have the money to buy expensive imported items from the United States. They can barely afford food. Next, let's move on to their advantage 1, subpoint A. They say that the Cuban homes are so bad that the people are dying from their homes falling around them. We say that that is a very rare occasion and that there are more important issues happening in Cuba that should be the main focus. If you look at their inherency, subpoint B card, it states that there are 11.2 million residents in Cuba. So if you look back at their advantage 1, subpoint A card, it says that 4 people died and 6 people were injured. That is 10 people out of 11.2 million in Cuba. So this is really not that big of a deal, but there are worse things happening in Cuba that are affecting and killing thousands of Cubans. My evidence is from Diseases Kill Thousands of Cubans by Cooper, Ordonez, and Espanol Bruto of 2006. Of the 73,000 deaths recorded in the year, 19,000 were coded with heart disease, 26% total of CVD, which were included in heart disease, strokes, and other unsuspected diseases of the arteries and veins, according to 41% of all deaths. The male to female ratio of deaths from CVD was a 1.1 to 1.0. CHV accounted for 73% of reported causes of heart disease. Hyperactive heart disease represented the second most common diagnosed category. Rheumatic fever has virtually disappeared, and the number of deaths of chronic vascular disease, extremely low. Heart disease was 40% higher from the urban area and rural areas, which is highly rated for observed in the city of Havana. In 2000, it was estimated that Potential years of life of 1,000 per person were lost in the result of CVD ranking second behind cancer. The impact of this, Judge, is that there are much more devastating issues going on in Cuba. I mean, Judge, what would you rather Cuba be focused on? Researches and cures for cardiovascular disease and cancer, or putting their focus on an issue that really isn't there in the first place? Next, let's move on to their advantage 2, subpoint B. They say that lifting the embargo against the sales of construction materials would create thousands of jobs in the United States. We say that 2,500 jobs is not going to help the U.S. even in the slightest. My evidence is from the number of jobs in the U.S. of Department of Numbers 2013. There were 136,133,000 jobs in the U.S. in August of 2013. According to the CES survey of employers, and the CPS survey of householders shows that 144,170,000 employed persons for the month. If their case is going to create 2,500 jobs in the U.S., how is this going to substantially impact the United States at all? Judge, there are currently 136.1 million jobs in the United States. Adding 2,500 is a 0.001 increase. That is nowhere near substantial, so therefore their advantage 2 no longer stands. In conclusion, Judge, I attacked their harms and showed you that the Cuban citizens don't have the money to buy these expensive products in the U.S. and that they have access to building materials right at home. Next, I attacked their plan, showing you that even their own 1AC is not aware that the Cuban government is in debt and they do not have the money to be able to pay for the building materials from the United States, so therefore their plan could not work. And next, I also attacked their advantage 1, showing you that there are more devastating things happening in Cuba that need to be addressed. And lastly, I attacked their advantage 2, showing you that it is not a substantial increase of jobs, so therefore they no longer stand as one of their advantages. I am now open for cross-examination and points of clarification.
Okay.
Hold on. I'll move my stuff out of the way so that you can have some room.
Judge ready? Opposing team ready?
Mm-hmm.
Partner ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. How are these businesses, these 1,000 businesses down in Cuba, getting these materials if they barely have enough money to feed themselves?
These businesses, when they open on their own, they have their own methods of getting their materials. It's like your average small town business, like Miss Knitters creates her own yarn kind of thing. They have their own accesses to their materials.
Okay. And on to the statement where you said these sicknesses. Doesn't Cuba have free health care?
I don't see how that's relevant.
They don't have to pay for these much-needed medicines and doctor visits, which wouldn't make this sickness such a bad harm.
Cubans have one of Cuba has some of the best doctors in the world.
So why are they so sick?
Because cancer is a large issue all around the world. If
So-
they have all these great doctors, they should probably be put to work in focusing on how to find a cure for cancer.
So if the cancer is so bad all around the world,
Mhm.
this is not unique to just Cuba.
It affects Cuba.
Okay. And selling 1/8 of the building materials needed, which is over 2,500 new jobs. If you take that, that would be just around or more 20,000 jobs, if you do the math.
20,000 jobs still is not a substantial increase.
So you're saying if there was a family who their parent really needed a job and these new jobs open, would you count it good if this new job opening came up and they can
So you're telling me, okay, you're telling me that there would be 2,000, sorry, you said 20,000 if you take that, multiply it, 20,000 jobs in the United States. If you spread that all across the United States, that is almost 1 to 2 jobs per regional area. So what you're saying is that the 136.1 million jobs that are in the United States now is not going to be this average home family and the dad that needs a job isn't going to be able to find a job with the 136.1 million jobs already available.
Okay. That is all.
That's it? Okay.